2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes app. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So, hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This, of course, depends on when you are tuning in, but whatever time you're listening, we welcome you. We appreciate you. Here we are on the eve of the Jewish holiday of Shavuos. Shavuos holiday begins this evening on the 16th and concludes on Tuesday the 18th in the evening. This is the holiday when we celebrate when the Torah was given at Mount Sinai, which is on the calendar 3,333 years ago. So with that in mind, I'm going to highlight some of the aspects of this holiday and, of course, take the opportunity to wish everybody a very happy holiday of Shavuos. At our synagogue, we're having services at both days in the morning at 10 a.m. And have in mind that on Monday at about 10:45, we'll be reading out loud the Ten Commandments. Very important for all of us to hear the Ten Commandments, once again, read from the Torah. And on Tuesday, at the same time, about 10:45, we'll be having the Yiska, the memorial services for all those who've passed on, our loved ones. Everyone is welcome. Don't have to be a member. Main thing is, let us all celebrate the holiday of Shavuos. But what is it all about? Well, let me first tell you a little bit of a story, little history. That in Israel, there's an organization called Rachshei Lev. This organization helps children with serious illnesses and their families. Among the things that they do is to realize those precious child's dreams, similar to what we have here in the United States called the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Now, there was this 10-year-old girl named Emily who had been battling a serious illness for 7 years when the following happened. Her dream had been to meet presidents and leaders of countries, and in her lifetime, she already met with Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and the President Reuven Rivlin and many other world leaders. So when Emily heard that U.S. President at that time, 2017, when Donald Trump was coming to visit Israel, she approached this organization and asked them to make her dream come true and arrange for her to meet the president. So the organization's staff of Rachshei Lev called the White House staff, coordinating the visit to Israel. And those staffers, the people involved, responded at the first opportunity and authorized the meeting. They even prepared a special invitation for her. So when Donald Trump visited Israel and visited Yad Vashem, Emily was invited to be there too. Immediately after the official memorial service at Yad Vashem, the president was ushered into a side room where young Emily had another dream come true. People who were present in the room report that it was a very emotional encounter. President Trump expressed interest in her medical condition and shared with her his job as president. In turn, Emily shared a picture she had especially drawn for the president. Which brings me to a fascinating thought from the Torah portion that was read only yesterday. In the community, we've now started reading the fourth book of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses. It's called Bamidbar. And so in this portion, we read about the importance of children. In the reading of the book of Bamidbar, also known as the Numbers or Chumash HaPekudim, right in the beginning, we find that God commands Moses to count all the menfolk from the age of 20-year-olds and up. And they're going to be the ones to go out to the army. In other words, it was a census for anyone suitable to be drafted into the military. But the Lubavitch Rebbe asked the question, why would they need an army in the desert when they already had the clouds of glory which were protective clouds, smoothing everything out in front of them. They had no wars or battles to fight. So the Rebbe explains that when the enemy knows that you have a strong military, then they don't start up with you in the first place. And so God wanted to make sure to everybody in the Middle East at that time to know that in the army, the Hebrew army at that particular time numbered 603,550 members. But then comes an interesting command that even as we were to count the men's folk, but those of the tribe of Levi, the Levi tribe, do not count. Don't count them together with everybody else. They have their own count. They could not be part of the census because they were not to be drafted into the military. But they did have a special mission assigned to them, and for that reason they also had to be counted. What was that? The mission of the Levites was to carry the tabernacles. They were there to be part of this, serving it. They were there encamping around the Mishkan. And when they traveled, they took it down and they erected it. But they were to be counted separately from the rest of the men's folk. The Levites had two missions. One was to guard the Mishkan. They made sure they camped around the tabernacles in the wilderness to make sure that nobody should come close, at the wrong time, because it was forbidden to enter. Then they were also responsible for erecting and dismantling this traveling temple, the Mishkan, and transporting it throughout all the years in the desert. And so they were not conscripted into the regular army. So they had this special mission reserved for them. But then we read that God commands Moses, count the sons of Levi. When do you count them? From 1 month old, and they shall be counted. Now, understand, counting every Levi infant 1 month old and up is something that makes no sense. It's one thing to conduct a separate census of them because they have a separate mission. They're not part of the army. They're part of the construction, the building and taking it down of the Mishkan. But counting babies from 1 month old? Can a baby take part or assemble the Mishkan, these tabernacles? What exactly would you need to count them? So seemingly, you would have to count them from an age higher than the age at which the rest of the people were counted. After all, recruits for the army were drafted from the age of 20 and up. While the Levium, they served in their capacities in terms of assembling and disassembling and everything else that they did in the temple was from the age of 30 until 50. So why would they be counted from the age of 1 month? And Rashi explains that, the Levites, the general purpose of the Levium, the Levites, was to camp around the tabernacles of testimony. They guarded this temple, the Mishkan. Now, the way in which a Levi guards the temple wasn't by standing at the gates bearing weapons, that kind of guarding. Rather, they simply camped there. They camped around. They formed a human fence, and thus automatically no one could enter the Mishkan when they shouldn't be going there. And for that, you don't need to be an adult. Instead, the families of the Levites who camped around the Mishkan, the men, the women, and the children, they all acted as guards of this temple. In the very fact that they pitched their tents and lived around the Mishkan, they became guards of this temple. Every individual inside each individual tent, regardless of their age, was a guard of the Mishkan. And as Rashi points out, from 1 month old and up, they were appointed to be called a guard over the holy watch. So now we can ask the question, what was inside the Mishkan? What was inside this building that was so important that the entire tribe was to be appointed as guards over it? Well, along comes Nachmanides and explains that the primary object of this Mishkan was the ark in which was placed the tablets of the covenant, the Torah scroll that was next to it. This was the essence, this was the key. The whole purpose of this building was the ark. And this is what the sons of Levi guarded. It therefore emerges from this that the babies, even the young babies in the tribe of Levi, were very much part of the guardian of the Torah. Because the ultimate, what they were guarding was the great treasure of the Torah itself. And we're insisting that everybody, even a little child from the age of 1 month old, was already included in this guardianship. You see, the holiday of Shavuos, which is about to begin, and we have an amazing teaching that when God gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai, He asked for a guarantor. Who shall be the guarantors upon whom we can rely that the Torah will be maintained so that it will not be forgotten? So at first, they offered the rabbis who will study with everybody. They offered the prophets. They can be the guarantees. They offered Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. God said, no good. They tried the prophets. They tried the rabbis. They tried the elders. But guess what? God did not accept this. But ultimately, when we said our children will be guarantors for you, Banenu, Arevim, Badenu, our children will be the guardians of the Holy Watch, that they will study and they will pass it on to the next generation of kids, then it became official. That's when the Torah was given to us. And so the Rebbe encouraged children on this holiday to come to hear the Ten Commandments in synagogue on Shavuos, because all the children, whatever age, they are guarantors and guardians of the Torah. Even days-old babies should be present during the reading of the Ten Commandments. Some people argue and say, well, I'll bring my child who is 6 or 7 years old and understands. He'll be capable of listening. He'll understand a little bit of the Ten Commandments. But why bring babies to shul when they're only going to make noise and bother the adults from hearing the Ten Commandments? Why would this be? It would seem that the gain is cancelled out by the loss. So we have a famous teaching that talks about a great rabbi, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was a leader of the nation during the era of the destruction of the Second Temple. And we're told that he had 5 students, 5 disciples. Now obviously he had thousands of students, but it was those specific 5 who became the leaders of the next generation. And he enumerated their praises. And so when he's talked about his student, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yochanan would say, this person, he's like a cemented pit that does not lose a drop. Meaning that he had a phenomenal memory. He remembered everything that he'd learned or read. In regards to another student with a similar name, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yochanan said, he is like an overpowering wellspring. It means a very brainstorming person whose mind is constantly flowing and innovating. And then, on the third disciple, they would say that, Rabbi Yeshua, happy is the one who bore him. Now, what kind of compliment is this for a prominent rabbi to praise his mother? So the Talmud explains that one of the sages of that generation, his name was Rabbi Dosa, informed the sages of Israel about the birth circumstances of this Rabbi Yeshua and said something fantastic. I remember how his mother would bring his carriage to the synagogue so that the words of Torah would be stuck in his ears. So Rabbi Yeshua's mother would bring him in the stroller to the study hall while he was still an infant, so you can hear the Torah being studied. So the Rabbi Yochanan, wanted to praise Rabbi Yeshua, and what was his expression of compliment? Happy is the one who bore him, meaning that the entire greatness of Rabbi Yeshua in his study and his leadership was in the merit of his mother, who took him to the study hall while he was still a baby. And so what we learn from here, the Rebbe says, that when even a tiny little child hears the Ten Commandments, it becomes engraved in his or her soul, just as he is gaining self-awareness, and that will influence them, little babies, for the rest of their lives. And so, my friends, today, I cordially invite you to bring our little gods. That means if you have young children, even young children or any children, grandchildren, to come to your local synagogue, come to our synagogue, to come to hear the 10 Commandments. Now, the commandments themselves, which brings us to the 10 Commandments, that we listen to very carefully. Again, at our synagogue, it's about 10:45 on Monday. Now, for starters, the 10 Commandments are written on 2 stone tablets. 5 on one tablet and 5 on the other. The Rabbi discusses why indeed were the 10 Commandments given on 2 separate tablets. If God wanted to emphasize the importance of each tablet, then he should have given each one on a separate tablet. And if that wasn't the intention, then perhaps they should have been all written on one tablet. Why 5 on one tablet and 5 on the other? Especially when the letter count is not equal. The 10 Commandments contain 620 letters, but most of these letters are in the first commandment. The first tablet contains over 500 letters, but the second tablet, however, contains far fewer letters. And so why 5 by 5? What's so special about the number 5? Why was it done that way? The fact that God chose to give the commandments in number 10 is understood, because it comes as an extension to the 10 statements by which the universe was created. But what is there about the number 5? Why were they divided up into 2 tablets, 5 on each, and were not really equal in terms of the amount of letters? So here's one answer. When we look at a human body, we find the number 10 divides in half. Every human being has 10 fingers, divided among 2 hands, 5 on one hand and 5 on the left. 5 on the right and 5 on the left. The right hand and the right side symbolizes the characteristic of chesed, of giving, of yamin mikarevis, which translates the right hand draws close. The left hand symbolizes tough love, smol doche, the left hand pushes away. All this means there are things that one should pull close to and things that we should reject and push away. And we find this concept in the division of the 2 tablets. On the first tablets, you have the first 5 commandments. Faith in God, prohibition against idol worship, not to take God's name in vain, observing the Sabbath, respecting one's parents. On the second tablet, you have the second 5 tablets. 5 commandments. Don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't testify falsely, and don't lust. So the first tablet's commandments are more positive. And with these draws closer to ourselves with our right hands. These are things that we need to do. With the second tablet, however, we find that they're more negative. What not to do. What we must push away with our left hands. Don't steal, don't murder, etc. But another difference between the tablets was explained by the Rabbi. Namely, that the first tablets contain mitzvahs between man and God, or the ritual mitzvahs, while the second tablet contains those that are between man and fellow man, or another way of saying the ethical mitzvahs. We can add another possible explanation that jumps out at us. The first tablet contains mitzvahs that pertain more to women, while the second tablets contain mitzvahs that are intended for men. After all, who respects fathers and mothers more? Who is busier with helping elderly parents? The sons will do their parents a favor and show up once a month and make them a cup of tea, and discharging themselves of their duties to their parents. The daughters, on the other hand, are the ones busy with their parents day and night and never tiring. The same thing applies when it comes to emunah, to faith in God. Women have much more simple faith and fear of the Almighty than men. Sometimes it's really actually something that jumps out at you and something that everyone sees every day. Who worries more about the Sabbath in the house? Who creates the atmosphere of Sabbath in the house? Who worries about the Friday night meal? Who lights the Shabbos candles? And so on and so forth. Without the woman, there's no Shabbos in the house. However, the mitzvahs on the second tablets are intended primarily for men. Don't murder, don't steal, don't lust. No explanations are necessary. It's clear who those commandments are intended for. But what's interesting is that when God told Moses, before giving the Torah, he said, go to speak to the Jewish nation and clarify from them whether they want the Torah. And he said like this. He said, so say so to the house of Jacob and speak to the sons of Israel. And Rashi explains that the house of Jacob means the women folk, and the sons of Israel means the men folk. In other words, God tells Moses to first address the women and only then the men. And we might say that God also did that himself by first speaking the commandments that relate more to women, and only then speaking those more related to the men. However, the Rabbi concludes and points out that a healthy person uses both hands, not just one hand, meaning that it's not enough to just do the interpersonal or ethical mitzvahs, the mitzvahs that we do with the left hand. Rather, we also need to do the mitzvahs that are done with the right hand. Similarly, it's not enough to just do the negative mitzvahs, the things that we should not do. Rather, we need to keep also the positive ones as well. The young couples, all of us who go out, think of this in the following manner. Each of us, thank God, if you and your spouse are like the two tablets of the Ten Commandments, the right hand and the left hand. And the first tablet, the mitzvahs that relate more to women, is on the right hand, the trait of love. The second tablet, the mitzvahs relating more to men, is the left hand, the trait of tough love, which is also needed sometimes. So, only together do they complete the action. And what's true of husband and wife is true really of all married couples. Each of us should see ourselves, every couple, every married couple should see themselves like two tablets, that one without the other cannot endure. One just needs to be careful not to break the tablets, so to speak. So, little continuing. Of course, we all know, where was the Ten Commandments given? On Mount Sinai. Does anybody know where Mount Sinai is? Has everyone ever been there? I've seen several pictures of mountains that are supposed to be Mount Sinai, but how can you be sure it's really the real one? I once saw a stone that one said to come from Mount Sinai. The proof was that the natural designs on the sides of the stone were engravings of bushes, since the first time Moses spoke to God was in the burning bush on Mount Sinai. And this stone must certainly be from there. Still, I remain skeptical, that is, until someone will find pieces of the broken tablets, or perhaps the sandals that Moses took off when he first saw the burning bush. So until I see that, now doesn't this seem strange? Mount Sinai is mentioned 16 times in the Torah. 16 times. Every child knows it. Schools, synagogues, temples, hospitals are named after it. It's the place where mere mortals saw God face to face. Yet we have no idea where it is. On the other hand, Temple Mount, never mentioned by name in the Torah, is the single most famous place on the earth. Torah tells us something unique about the mountain's holiness. During the giving of the Torah, the Jews were commanded not to touch it, but afterwards, when the sound of the blast of the shofar, they could ascend. It disappeared. This means that after God's presence left Mount Sinai, the place did not retain any holiness. No holiness remained in the spot where God gave us the Torah. Now, the question is why? The same question can be asked about the gravesite of Moses. Do you know where he's buried? Does anyone know it? So on the second day of the holiday, we recite the Yizkar, the memorial services. Many people whose parents are deceased have the custom to go to visit their gravesite. Now this custom goes back to when our forefather Jacob buried his beloved wife Rachel at the side of the road leading to Bethlehem. He foresaw that his descendants would one day be led into exile along that very road, and they would stop by the gravesite of their great-grandmother Rachel and beseech her to pray to God for mercy on their behalf. So also Caleb, one of the 12 spies, he visited the gravesite of his forefathers to pray for strength to resist the pressure from the other spies. This has been the custom throughout our nation's history until this very day, when thousands of people visit the gravesite of the Rabbi, the Lubavitcher Rabbi, to pray there and have their prayers answered. This is why we know that where our forefathers and all the great leaders of our nations are buried. That's the reason why people go to visit these holy locations. Yet curiously, the graveside of none other than Moses, the single greatest prophet and leader, is not known. Why should we not be able to go there and pray for all the needs as we do at the graveside of all other great men of our history? Everyone knows the famous first sentence that Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai. Many people are called Moses. There are even a few people who I know who are called Sinai. Our sages use the name Sinai to describe scholarship, greatness, and these are two names that are iconic amongst us. So this is the question: how come? We always talk about the greatness of Mount Sinai, the holiness. So not knowing where it is has some deeper meaning of why we do not know. The reason is why we don't know the exact place of Mount Sinai and the grave of Moses' grave. God did not want Mount Sinai and Moses' gravesite to become a tourist attraction or even a place for yearly pilgrimages for the faithful. Rather, whenever we study Torah, the place where we're studying becomes Mount Sinai. And through the learning, we revealed Moses within himself. Because as we know, every one of our souls contains a spark of Moses. So, as the Talmud tells us, it's not the place that brings honor upon the man. Rather, it's the man who brings honor upon the place. As we saw at Mount Sinai. When God was there, everything was kept away. But when God left, well, it just became another mountain. So when a person says the Yizkor service in memory of his parents and loved one, we all know that children say Kaddish in honor of their parents' memories. It's also known a custom to give charity in the merit of departed ones. But did you know that it is a custom to study Mishnah for the departed one? The reason is because the Hebrew word Mishnah has the same letters as the word Neshama, soul. Therefore, when we stand for Yizkor and we want to do something special in honor of our loved ones, I'm going to make this suggestion. What better way to honor one's parents on the day the Torah was given is to resolve to study more Torah in their honor. And when we study in our mom or dad's honor, their souls in heaven reach up and are elevated by what you're doing. So, dear friends, we do have the holiday of Shavuos coming up. Let's make every use of it, celebrate it. We have dairy items to eat during in the morning, the first day at least. And again, I want to wish everybody a Chag Sameach, a happy holiday of Shavuos, where the next 2 days are spent with holiday meals, lighting the candles in the evenings, to usher in the holidays, and of course to come to the synagogue to hear the Ten Commandments once again, and of course the Yizkor on the second day. This is your host, Rabbi Perl, wishing you all the best, and thank you so much for joining us. 1, 2, 3, 4.